Good evening and welcome to Business 7. My name is Philippus Usiku, your host. Tonight, we'll be looking at the presentations at the recently concluded Oil and Gas Conference. And then, as usual, we'll bring you the top 5 stories that made headlines on the African continent. So stay tuned.
Connection. It's in the human touch, the feeling of belonging. It inspires us and empowers us, creates clarity from complexity. It starts new conversations, unlocks the power of advice, and makes an impact on your life. At Alex Forbes, we pioneer insight to provide you with advice that connects your decisions of today to your impact tomorrow.
Kicking off, let's look at the top 5 stories that made headlines on the African continent as provided by Reuters.
Here's what's been making the business headlines in sub-Saharan Africa this week. China has resumed imports of South African beef, its customs administration said on Thursday. They were banned in March 2022 due to an outbreak of foot and mouth disease on a cattle farm. The resumption comes just ahead of a visit by President Xi Jinping to South Africa for the BRICS summit. Also on BRICS, the bloc's development bank closed the auction for its first South African Rand bonds, a 1 billion Rand 5-year note and a 500 million Rand 3-year note, on Tuesday. The new development bank has been under pressure to boost its local currency fundraising and lending. A Nigerian court on Thursday adjourned a hearing for suspended Central Bank Governor Godwin Emefiele until August 23rd, as a co-defendant was unable to attend, a government lawyer said. That meant Emefiele, who is facing a 20-count fraud charge, was unable to enter a plea. Also in legal news, the Madagascan president's chief of staff has been arrested in London on suspicion of seeking a bribe from Precious Stones miner Gemfields, the UK's National Crime Agency said. Romy Andrianariso and a French associate, Philippe Tabuteau, were allegedly seeking $286,000 and a 5% equity stake to secure licenses to operate in Madagascar. A lawyer for Andrianariso did not respond to a request for comment. One representing Tabuteau declined to comment. Madagascan President Andry Rajoelina's office said the aid had been sacked with immediate effect. The NCA expressed its gratitude to Gemfields for raising the matter. And finally, Safaricom's M-Pesa mobile money service went live in Ethiopia on Wednesday. The Kenyan telecoms operator is betting that Ethiopia, which has around 120 million people and one of Africa's youngest populations, will power growth for years to come.
Shiwana Ndenyema, the executive for business strategy at NAMCO, recently presented at the Oil and Gas Conference. His presentation was focused on the status of oil and gas activities in Namibia. Let's have a look.
So just a history and overview of the discoveries the Honorable Prime Minister shared along with Memenangula, and we were cautioned not to repeat information. But we're looking at 5 essentially, I know the Commissioner says gigantic, but I'd like to call decent discoveries. So we have the Kudu gas-to-power project that is currently ongoing. We've got the Graf, the Venus, and the Lorana, and the Jonker. And these 4 oil discoveries are essentially located in the Orange Basin. And there are other ongoing exploration and appraisal activities by the following operators: the Shell, Total Energies, BW, Kudu, ExxonMobil, Chevron, Galp Energia, Rhino Resources. But these are just but a few that are operating. We obviously have a hype of activity with the other operators essentially. So, as the more perceptive, the volumetrics around the discoveries in the oil industry, not only in Namibia, but the world over, is somewhat clouded by secrecy. And that's really because the organizations that are participating in these discoveries are listed on various exchanges, and any sort of information or misinformation can disrupt the stock market. So that's why we guard it jealously. But we commissioned a study with Wood Mackenzie, and these are the most conservative estimates. We're looking at about 11 billion barrels of reserve, and of course the Venus 1X discovery with 5.1 billion barrels. So towards the end of September, we'll have more explicit numbers following the finalization of the appraisal campaigns, essentially. And then, of course, you can't come to a conference like this and not hear of any volumetric. So those are the associated barrels. So just to give you a context, so these are proven crude reserves in Africa in 2021 by country. So Angola, as you can appreciate, the oil and gas industry in Angola has revolutionized the Angolan economy, and they're sitting with 7.78 barrels of oil, a billion barrels of oil. And if you look at that relative to our discoveries, we're looking at least 11 billion with a population of 2.5 million. So you can just have an appreciation of how that will sort of revolutionize the Namibian economy. And of course, Libya, for political reasons, they're battling a tad bit, but they have got significant reserves of 48 billion barrels. The highest reserves in the world are sitting in Venezuela at 300 billion barrels. However, this is heavy oil, which is quite expensive and complex to extract from the ground. And the Honourable Minister, Prime Minister, indicated that we've got light oil, which is a much more better product to extract. So we've also got some facts around how these discoveries are located in relation to the global deepwater oil discovery since 2015. So Guyana is the latest hotspot. So the Total Venus discovery is just below the Guyana discovery of 2015, essentially. Now, 3 of these 4 are in the top 30 deepwater discoveries since 2015, essentially. So these are just some key energy projects timelines. So you can see we're looking at going for FEED. So that's the front-end engineering design. We're busy with that for Kudu. So NAMCO is working alongside BW Kudu. And we're looking at FID for Kudu for the gas-to-power project sometime in the 3rd quarter of 2024, essentially. And of course, there are efforts from the operators to expedite to first oil for the Total and Shell discoveries, essentially. And the conservative estimates suggest that by sometime between 2029 and 2030, we are looking at first oil. But obviously, these timelines keep changing as you get a better appreciation of the reservoir. So, in terms of the phases, I think the phase where we are at now, we likely to require light touch in Namibia. So, the phase that we are at right now, we're looking at 2021 to 2026, arguably. We will be seeing very limited value because you have operators setting up in-country offices, but the recruitment is limited to primarily administrative and logistical positions. And, of course, given the fact that we haven't finalized the appraisal campaigns, essentially. But phase 2 is probably the exciting one. And the Ministry of Mines and Energy has already started the process of developing a local content policy. And that is really aimed at unlocking the sort of indirect and induced benefits associated with the discoveries, essentially, through products and services to support the oil and gas industry. So between 2026 and 2032, we will see local benefits prior to production peak when project revenues start streaming in. And then, of course, phase 3, that's post-peak benefits and economic impact that need to be sustainable in the Namibian economy to avoid an over-reliance on oil and gas, essentially. So
Daonyema further elaborated on the public debate on government's stake in oil and gas projects, and as well as how Namibia can benefit. Let's have a look.
And this is the conversation around the economic impacts of the discovery. So we've essentially got 3 impacts: the direct impacts, indirect benefits, and the induced benefits. Direct benefits relate to the revenue that is associated from the proceeds of oil and the employment that is created. The indirect benefits relate to the sort of local content, products and services that serve to support the industry. And the induced benefits are essentially as a result of this increase in spending within the economy, you have an increase in household income that has a spillover on other economic activities, essentially. So there's a very interesting discussion in public dialogue, and that's around government stake. So in as much as NAMCO carries 10% of the state's interest through carried interest, so carried interest essentially means that you don't pay up until a certain point in time, whether it's before development or post-production essentially. So if you look at the cumulative value that is accrued to the state, we're looking at about 54%. So 5% royalty, and you're looking at tax, petroleum tax of about 35%, and if you couple that with NAMCO stake, we're looking at anywhere between 53 and 56% essentially. And of course, other additional windfall taxes of 5 to 12% that are essentially negotiable. So that is the value that is accrued to the state. And when we have a conversation around the oil and its contribution to the sector, to the socio-economic development, this is the conversation we can essentially have. So that's just how the government take compares with other jurisdictions. So we compare quite well. If you look at Guyana, they've got 2% of royalty, whereas ours is 5%. And this is just the conversation around the CAPEX spend that our Right Honourable Minister referred to. We speak of the economic benefits in as far as GDP impact is concerned. So there's an expectation that these discoveries will double Namibia's GDP by 2040 to close to $37 billion US, and of course at peak, with these conservative estimates, and these are just conservative estimates, we're looking about 3,600 to 4,000 direct jobs essentially created by the sector. So indirect and induced benefits, so these are the spillover industries across the oil and gas value chain. So within the core of the onion, we're looking at your more technical services, so well services, ring hire that really requires sophisticated operatorship competencies. And as you go into the outer space of the onion, you look at more of the sort of available resources in country that can participate in the discovery. So whether it's freight services, electrical engineering, maintenance, and so forth. So Deloitte is, at the instruction of the Minister of Mines and Energy, busy with a baseline study to understand the sort of skills that are required and the sort of industries that will be created by the sector, and that's probably how entrepreneurs and service companies can position themselves.
Lastly, Ndonyema shed light on the energy transition debate in Namibia. Let's have a look.
But just to give you a sense, the market size of the sector is 6.9 trillion, and that's 3.8% of the global economy. And the industry is expected to grow by 4.9% to 7.3 trillion in 2023 effectively. So how long will this value lost? And we're talking about the sector, and this is the conversation around the energy transition and the harmony between fossil fuels and sustainable energies. So while the tide is gradually shifting towards renewable alternatives, the world depends on fossil fuels, in particular oil and gas, in a plethora of ways. And this is just to give you a sense. So 3,000 different kinds of products are made of oil. Petroleum products, as the more perceptive, we're looking at your ADO, which is your diesel, ULP, which is your petrol, gasoline, LSFO, and jet fuel. And of course, your crude in its raw form can produce your tar, bitumen, Carrigan, and you obviously used to make products such as plastics, skate wheels, and so forth. And an interesting revelation is really, if you have ever had bubblegum, the base, the petroleum base in bubblegum is actually the secret gum that actually creates that gum behavior. So luckily there are other ingredients to add sort of flavor. And obviously other perishables such as asphalt, lubricant, ink, cosmetics, and waxes. So this is just to demonstrate to you that oil is more than just your sort of petroleum products. There are other derivative products that can flow from that oil. So how long will it last? We ask ourselves. NAMCO, we've set up a department called the Sustainable Energies. It's just really to manage the transition. So the argument, and we support the political principle orientation around a funded, paced, and just energy transition. Funded in a sense that The proceeds from oil will be used to fund the sustainable energies conversation, paced in a sense that we do it over a specific period of time and give ourselves sufficient time to derive value from the resources that lay beneath our feet. And of course, just in a sense that we need to transition first from darkness to light and have a conversation around the transition.
Let me quickly show you something. Don't worry. Next time, I check nice.
Thanks, but it's okay. FNB Insurance checks nicer.
At FNB Insurance, we provide cover for all your valuables, from your phone to your laptop to your car. FNB Insurance. You value it, we cover it. T's and C's apply.
BRICS is the talk of the town. South Africa and China have similar views on expanding BRICS. David Doyle has more.
A friendly welcome for China's President Xi Jinping on Tuesday as he arrived for the BRICS summit in South Africa. He was presented with the Order of South Africa by his counterpart Cyril Ramaphosa. The warm reception is also indicative, perhaps, of how the two men see eye to eye on one of the main issues of the Johannesburg summit, and that is expansion. China is keen to grow the bloc, which also includes Brazil, Russia, India and South Africa, as it vies with the United States for geopolitical influence.
South Africa and China have similar views with regard to the expansion of BRICS membership, and we look forward to the discussions.
Russia also wants to bring in new members to counter its diplomatic isolation over its invasion of Ukraine, which accounts for some 40% of the world's population and a quarter of the global GDP, remains a disparate group. Expansion, some argue, can forge it into a counterweight against the West. But there are tensions. India is wary of Chinese dominance and has warned against a rushed expansion. Its foreign minister said on Monday that the country has a positive intent and open mind. Brazil, meanwhile, fears more members will dilute its influence. On Tuesday, President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva said he supported other countries joining, particularly Argentina, but with certain conditions, so it does not become a Tower of Babel.
Os BRICS têm possibilidade.
He also said that BRICS is not meant to challenge other bodies such as the G7, but to organize the so-called Global South.
E nós queremos.
That was a view seemingly shared by Xi.
We need to strengthen strategic cooperation, practice true multilateralism, promote the expansion of the representation and voices of countries in the Global South in the global governance process.
The leaders will hold a mini-retreat and dinner on Tuesday evening, where they are likely to discuss a framework and criteria for admitting new countries. South African officials say over 40 countries have expressed an interest. Of them, nearly 24 have formally asked to be admitted, with some expected to send delegations to the summit.
Gabon has finalized Africa's first debt for nature swap. David Doyle explores if other African nations will follow suit.
Africa's first Debt for Nature swap, which will fund marine conservation in Gabon, has backers hoping for more such money-saving environmental deals. But some say there's room for improvement in the increasingly popular transactions. First, let's look at what they are. At their simplest, Debt for Nature swaps see a country's debt bought up by a bank or specialist investor and replaced with cheaper loans. A development finance credit guarantee or risk insurance helps bring the cost down. The savings are meant to fund conservation. Gabon, whose beaches and coastal waters are home to the world's largest population of endangered leatherback turtles, has switched $436 million of its international bonds to a new $500 million blue bond. It has a lower interest rate and longer maturity. That's expected to generate $163 million for marine conservation projects over the next 15 years. Gabon's President Ali Bongo has said the swap is an important moment for eco-friendly finance deals in Africa. Too often, talks of these new mechanisms remain just that, he said in a statement. But in this case, we have made it a reality. Bankers have said a handful of other African countries are also working on debt-for-nature deals, along with Sri Lanka and a clutch of Caribbean and Indian Ocean islands. US non-profit The Nature Conservancy advised Gabon's government on its deal. Head of Sustainable Debt Slav Gachev said the organization expects to do between 1 and 3 deals per year until 2030. Though he would not name any countries, he said eco-friendly swaps the Nature Conservancy advises on could total $10 billion by the end of the decade. But there are question marks over how Gabon's conservation promises will be enforced, says Andrew Stanners, investment director at Aberdeen. The emerging market investor holds some of Gabon's current bonds. Stanners said the Debt for Nature deal is brilliant from a fiscal point of view. The new bond comes with just over 6% interest, much cheaper than the 9 to 10.5% yield other bonds have been trading at. The US Development Finance Corporation has provided risk insurance. That's resulted in an AA2 investment-grade credit rating from Moody's for the blue bond, a full 14 notches above the Gabonese government's own junk CAA1 grade. But Stanners also questioned how the insurance would work if Gabon did one day default. Gregory Smith, a fund manager at M&G Investments, queried why Gabon Swap had seen just $95 million bought back from a bond that needs refinancing in 2025. That's compared to $405 million of its two 2031 maturing bonds. The transaction had offered the chance to eliminate this debt risk, he wrote on the Bond Vigilantes blog. But the risk remains.
A fuel subsidy has been reinstated in Kenya to stabilize fuel prices. Let's have a look.
Kenya has reinstated a small fuel subsidy, the energy regulator said on Monday, in a reversal of government policy following public anger over the high cost of living. The aim is to stabilize retail fuel prices over the next 30 days. On coming to office last September, President William Ruto removed fuel and maize flour subsidies put in place by his predecessor. That was, he said, because he preferred subsidizing production rather than consumption. But the cuts have contributed to violent anti-government protests in recent months. The regulator, known as EPRA, said the maximum price of a litre of petrol would remain constant at 194.68 shillings, or $1.35. Consumers will be shielded from a 7.33 shilling increase, which the government will shoulder through a price stabilization fund. Fuel prices shot up when Ruto removed the subsidies, and again after the government doubled the fuel tax. Protests organized in response were called off last month after the opposition and Ruto agreed to talks to resolve their differences, the second such attempt this year.
Every day, you make choices that make you legendary. Journey together with us on the path to securing your legacy as a member of the League of Legends. With the Select Platinum Bundle Fee Premium Bank offering, you will access tools that will enable you to thrive. If you earn 850,000 Namibian dollars per annum or more, you can apply for this offering today via bankventug.com.na for only 447 Namibian dollars per month. Bank Ventug, a member of Capricorn Group.
That's all we had for you tonight. I hope you enjoyed the show. See you next week. Goodbye.